I'm thinking about all the people who criticize what I'm doing. I'm thinking about the reasons that they criticize what I'm doing. And why I'm thinking about that is the number of people who criticize I'm doing, not because what I'm doing is foolish or stupid, but just because criticizing me defends what they already are comfortable with believing, what they are already indoctrinated into, what they are already mentally invested in. You know, when I criticize myself, the biggest criticism is that this is probably hopeless. But the reason that it's hopeless is because the goats are coming back. It's not because there isn't the possibility of improvement. The improvements are happening. I'm documenting the improvements. The hopelessness is that the people in charge, the people that are supposed to know better, are going to do the same thing every year no matter what. Like, let's say that you're not impressed by my experimental plots. Well, at least I have them. You know, the people who are declaring that what they're doing is correct don't even have these. Like, where's their evidence? It's always on the people fighting for the planet to prove why destroying the planet is harmful to the planet, instead of the people destroying the planet proving that what they're doing isn't a problem. Because this gets worse every year when the goats graze. Who's monitoring that? What's amazing is that I've actually pursued the answers, and they pretend like they're going to help me. They pretend like they're going to provide the information, but they don't. They never do. They always end up going quiet on me. Their evidence doesn't exist. Mine, however you feel about it, however minuscule it may be in the big picture, is evidence. At least I have evidence. What evidence am I talking about specifically? The evidence that hand pulling is much more effective. The evidence that removing the goats, even if we didn't do anything else, just removing the goats, leads to passive recovery by nature. The evidence that where the goats graze, every year the weeds come back stronger with more variety of the invasives. The evidence that the natives that are sacrificed for the sake of the temporary reduction of the fire fuel that the goats eat, it's a very, very uneven trade-off. The natives are still recovering nearly a year later, whereas the invasives were back almost immediately. I don't know if you can hear it very well on the phone's microphone, but we've got street sweepers and leaf blowers in the background. That's what humans are willing to spend their resources on. They convert open spaces, habitat, vegetation into asphalt and concrete, which in turn leads to never-ending maintenance, I guess you'd say, to make sure that nothing's ever on our precious concrete and asphalt, which, by the way, is making the planet hotter. That's not a crazy hippie thing. Go walk into a field of plants and then go walk on top of some concrete. what's really crazy about this to me is how fast time goes by. I didn't get the idea to start doing my study plots until halfway through my time living in this urban sprawl. But if we take just 5 years and think about the powers that be spending money on long-term solutions rather than idiotic, repetitive battles that get us nowhere, then imagine spending that money on the type of thing I'm doing. You know, people scoff now at real work, at real labor, at using your hands. You got to be holding a machine and, you know, putting gas fumes into the air apparently for it to be considered intelligent. But the bottom line is the amount of money they spent on that stupidity just over the 5-year period of time that I've been here watching it, they could have real progress. They could have actually recovered some of these habitat zones. Now, the problem with that is they've changed their approach. They used to say that the goat grazing and everything was meant to improve the habitat. They don't say that so much anymore. Now everybody's just keying in on the fear of fire. And there's irrational thinking behind that, which comes with fear, which means that the public will buy into any ridiculous plan that's presented as long as you tell them that it's to protect them from fire. The point I'm getting at with that is they feed healthy, green, perennial, fire-resistant plants to the goats now. Well, they always did, but now there's no shame behind it because all they have to say is they've got to, you know, fight the vegetation. They've got to have a vegetation management plan. They've got to have a fuel reduction, no matter what form that fuel is in. So let's say that I, in a 5-year period of time, managed to get rid of this European invasive fire fuel and replaced it with natives. They would kill it anyway under this new plan. Oh, you got to get rid of vegetation. We are more comfortable with a dead planet than a living planet. Hey, at least concrete doesn't burn. If it gets hot enough, it will. I mean, that's an extreme thing to say. It's got to be really crazy hot for the concrete to burn. But, you know, that leads to the conversation of fire conditions. It's not about fire fuel, it's fire conditions. It's getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Things that wouldn't have burned are going to burn in the direction we're going. Lawnmowers, leaf blowers, street sweepers. That's where we put our most intelligent species minds to task at. Never-ending war with vegetation. Vegetation that we plant so that we can constantly spend money trying to maintain it. That's what lawns are. You don't even have the argument of using lawns for physical activity anymore because people aren't physically active, even children. So back to the conditions. If it gets hot enough, yes, even concrete will burn. It'll be blackened at a minimum. And what are we doing every year? Getting rid of more trees in response to our fear of fire. That's making conditions worse because it can only get hotter if we're getting rid of the creatures that cool the planet. Humans revel in their intelligence, but there's no wisdom accompanying that intelligence. There's no big picture outlook. And then you wonder, are we really that dumb? Or is it that there's a lot of money to be made by manipulative programs that are willing to feed on human fear. And yes, I am talking about CAL FIRE. I am talking about the U.S. Forestry Department. I am talking about animal agriculture. All of those are able to take advantage of the fear of fire. Speaking of big picture, everything's a process. If I hadn't done what I did out here earlier this year, I wouldn't be accomplishing what I'm accomplishing at the rate that I'm accomplishing right now. I've almost cleared this area out. But a lot of that's because a year ago, I worked on this place. Earlier this year, not that long ago, I came out and pulled the Italian thistle just so that I wouldn't be in pain when I came through to pull these grasses. That's three times in a year and a half that I came out to do work. And the results are evident. 3 times. We can't put that kind of effort into a more meaningful, long-term solution. Let me tell you something. You hear that noise in the background? That's constant here. The leaf blowers are constant here. The sprinkler systems, watering the sidewalks, lawnmowers, it's constant here. We always have money for some things. Suddenly the budget runs out when it comes to the planet. It's nice to talk about being concerned about native plants, native pollinators, water supply, but our actions don't reflect that we're actually concerned about it. This creek is already empty. The water, the snowmelt, is rushing down the mountain, only 40 minutes from here. And it's all diverted before it even gets here. Alfalfa fields, livestock, lawns, human use, reservoirs, so that we can keep watering our lawns all summer. You know where a lot of it's going? It's filling up Folsom Lake so that people can ride their boats around on it. During the time of year that Folsom Lake should be, or a lake, a natural lake, should be lower, we humans fill it up with the water that we've diverted from nature so that we can do things like ride jet skis. And I understand that that's important to people, that they enjoy that, but stop pretending like you care about nature, because you're killing nature for your recreation. I mean, maybe if we at least just had a couple of limits, if we were willing to compromise, if we were willing to sacrifice a little bit. It's like, okay, you want the parks, you want the lakes, you want to be able to ride your boats and your jet skis during the summer, then cut back on the parks, cut back on the lawns, cut back on the water waste for the decorative invasive plants that the people in charge have chosen to cover these urban sprawl cities with, that require never-ending watering. Or maybe they don't require it, but whether they require it or not, it's every night, every morning, the streets are flooded with excess watering. And everybody is comforted by that by putting the recycled water signs next to it. Listen, there's a finite amount of water. We're not importing it from planet recycled water. You don't get to just keep using more water and say, don't worry, it's recycled. See that? I shut my mouth briefly. Now you can hear the leaf blowers. Street sweepers. This doesn't look very appetizing, does it? Guess what? Despite the reputation goats have, it's not particularly appetizing to them either. They go for the native plants first. They go for the green plants first. They get to this last. And that's why this section here is only doing as well as it is. I put up this with barbed wire around the top, trying to protect the native plants I put in here. And the goats went right through the barbed wire to get to the native plants. I'll show you something over here. You can see some of the signs of the efforts I made. Right over here was where I had a wonderful blue elderberry doing quite well. And the goats only wounded it. I don't know how it survived, but after I saw that, I moved it, and now it's doing very well in the pot that I put it in. All the other plants were killed. Imagine what could be happening here if they would just stop grazing the goats. Because you see this problem behind me? That's the reason they bring in the goats, supposedly. And the goats make sure it's back worse than ever every year. This damn Italian thistle. Spikes really hurt. You know, you hear about these expert goat grazing people, the people that watch over the goats. They never even came in here. You can't tell me that those people are vital when they aren't even on site. I mean, there's some are on site. They're in their trailer or sitting under the shade of a tree watching soccer games. My little projects that I do out here should have been discovered. People should care about all the barbed wire out here. You know how I know that they don't care about the barbed wire? Well, this is repurposed barbed wire. This is barbed wire that the Park Service, the city, has decided was fine to leave behind after it was bought from the ranchers. And then decade after decade, they just let it stay there. Dangerous, dangerous, entangling barbed wire, doing nothing except posing a threat. That's fine. So no, I did not haul this in here. I just took it down from where it was and tried to build at least a little tiny semblance of native plant habitat for the animals here. What's extra frustrating about the goats tearing through my fencing to get to the native plants is that nearby they ignored the weeds that they were supposed to be eating. These European annuals produce so many seeds. Admittedly, it's an intimidating task. You just approach it a little at a time. Next thing you know, you've made progress. I have music playing, by the way. I have to block out, even when I come out here, I have to block out all the noise pollution of urban sprawl. Isn't that sad? There's nowhere to escape from it. As the songs die down, the noise pollution kicks in. That sound behind us is a street sweeper. You know what's going to happen after the street sweeper goes by? The leaf blowers are going to come through. The exploited, unskilled guys willing to do anything that the boss says. Just gonna blast all the debris from the HOAs back out onto the streets. I wish I hadn't given up on this spot now. I'd have a much more impressive plot to show people. But I keep telling myself, man, this place is doomed. Move on. You gotta put your time and effort in somewhere else. You know why that's really sad? The wildlife need us to care more. The wildlife need us not to have that attitude. I think way too many of us have that attitude. Just like, it's not your problem. You know, move on. You gotta take care of yourself. When we all have that attitude, then the wildlife are pretty effed. Or maybe we need to have the opposite of that attitude. Maybe if more of us felt like it was our responsibility to help rather than our right to not help. Because it actually, I hate to admit it, it helps to pretend it doesn't exist. I'm not very good at that. But when I come out here a lot and I get sucked into it, then it's hard to walk away at all because you see the suffering. You know, like I said, this creek is already dry. And in years past, I've been hauling out water for the wildlife here. And I put up the trail cams so I know that they use the water immediately, which means that they desperately need and want it. You wonder why the wildlife still venture into urban areas. Well, that's the only place there's any water, because we've stolen it all for our idiotic landscaping projects. Speaking of feeling bad for the wildlife, they never have a moment's peace from noise pollution. Here's the spot, here's the indention where my elderberry was. You can see some of the native leaves that I had put around it are still here. You know, for everyone who weed whacks, here, looking at exactly why that's stupid. These seeds, man, they're like unstoppable. They don't need much to start growing again, and there's so many of them. And the weed whacking just gets them to the ground faster. Look at, I gotta show a few things as I've been sweeping this. There's just more and more and more and more of them. And look what they do. Like they're ready to embed and grow in my protective gloves. God, look at it. And grasses are hard for me to identify, particularly when they're just budding. A lot of them look exactly the same when they're just budding, so I won't be able to pull the correct ones necessarily. Jeez, look at this. So I'm trying to get rid of as many of these seeds as possible, but you see what I'm surrounded by. And look at that. Look what they're doing in the openings of the bark. People, they're invasive for a reason. Bringing livestock through is not going to solve this. Well, I keep sweeping and digging and sweeping and digging, and I just keep finding the invasives underneath, already trying. So that's why this is a multi-year process. This is not a one-time thing. You have to plant the natives to try and help you take back over the land, take back over the territory, take back over the habitat. You know, when they start growing, when they get bigger, I can pull the invasives individually, but to expect not to have any invasives grow back is exceptionally unrealistic. So yeah, it's a process. The difference is, because they call the goat grazing program a multi-year process also. The difference is they don't have a timeline. They don't have an end date. They haven't said what year we should actually expect to see the changes, the improvements. They just get to keep operating ceaselessly without ever showing any signs of progress. With this, by next year, I'll be able to show progress. All right, so I churned up the ground. I'm gonna put some native grass seeds and some California poppies, do it in different sections, see which ones respond better. Poppies over here, grasses over here. It really sucks that the creek's empty already, because hauling water out here is a pretty big part of the overall challenge. I know I complain about the noise a lot. If you live in urban sprawl for 5 years and you're a nature lover, you'll start complaining about it too, because you hear in the distance the construction work of them continuing to turn this into human housing developments. And what those human housing developments mean is more street sweepers, more leaf blowers, more water waste, more people littering, and hotter temperatures. So we're replacing this with asphalt and concrete and noise pollution. I've been out here since 6:30 and that street sweeper's been going the entire time. And that's one of the quieter forms of noise pollution. I just have to count my blessings that the leaf blowers haven't chased me out of here yet. I mean, that machine's not even close. It's not even in sight. You gotta leave this area, go all the way across that field. And then there's another channel of dry creek and trees. And on the other side of that is more urban sprawl. And then that street sweeper is beyond that. And yet it's as clear, the noise of it is as clear as it is all the way over here. And the leaf blowers, that noise travels even further. If you go somewhere free from the noise pollution of humans, I don't know where you can find that, but go there and understand what nature sounded like before us. And then you understand what we've taken from them. You know, the conditions that they were meant to live in, we've absolutely destroyed. If I'm sensitive to this noise pollution, you can only imagine what it's like for them. Look at that bird on that willow. That willow also gets destroyed by the goats. You like the sound of that street sweeper? Yeah, that's nice, huh? And I come back over to this area and I look at the ground. Man. I just want you to imagine the absurdity of trying to say that goats moving through these aren't spreading those seeds everywhere that they go, as well as to the next spot that the vehicles take them to. That's why I see new species of invasives each year. You move these goats from areas that they're grazing invasive plants and native plants, but mostly invasive, and then you take them to the next spot, and I can't imagine how they're being spread. And this one is the Italian thistle seed. And here are your annual grass seeds. I'm actually tempted to leave the border looking kind of crappy because I don't want to draw too much attention to this. I don't want it to be too tempting for the goats. But you see, I've pretty much reduced it to the native plants, saplings and the horseweed. And I'm still amazed that that orange hummingbird mint is still alive. Not just alive, but doing very well. Well, there's a long way to go. But does it not look significantly different than when I arrived? Every journey starts with the first step, right? I gotta say something. When I look over here and I see these, despite my effort, these invasive seeds, when I see how easily they spread and how good they are at spreading, I've got to mention all the hay trucks, all the cattle feed trucks, the ones that are going up and down the highways of California, the ones that are constantly coming in from the Nevada border into California, and you see stuff flying off of the hay bales. If you think that the hay bales don't consist largely of this stuff, then you're lying to yourself. You're fooling yourself. And I've looked into it. As much as those companies want to claim that they guarantee a certain quality of cattle feed, no. Look at the fields that they graze. Look at the fields that you see the tractors out there creating the hay bales. They're full of this shit. They are. I've been in the fields. And even if a good percentage of those fields weren't these, a good percentage of them are. You realize if I hadn't done that work earlier this year, fighting these Italian thistles, I wouldn't even have a way to get into here. That's how bad the invasive plants are following the goats. This place gets closer to being impenetrable with invasive plants each year that they goat graze. The only place out here not absolutely smothered in this invasive plant problem is the place where one human decided to try a different approach.